Yes, since you have asked me.
In an interest of time, I'd say we just kind of get going, at least with there were maybe going to be almost 30 participants that come today for the faculty, and that just really exciting. It shows me that this is a very hot topic that a lot of people really want to start chatting about, understanding if there's some, suggestions that we can have moving forward, some policies. So big thank you to Dr. Scott Lukas today for helping lead these efforts. We don't have a better person at our faculty cadre than he is. And I think that's, we're really lucky to have him and his research that he's done on this topic. For the sake of time, if you wouldn't mind just dropping your name, your discipline, and how long you've been working at LTCC. I know I've seen a lot of faces. I saw a lot of people that responded to the invite, and thank you for that. But just so we all kind of know who we are in this room, we will have a time at the end for you can see questions and answers. And as we go along, just feel free. Scott's very open and loves questions. So, bring them along. So with that, I'm going to pass it right over to Dr. Scott Lukas, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Sarah and Trevor, for putting this together. And thank you all for attending. I think, as Sarah said, this is such a key topic for us. I will be sharing a ton of my experiences, and they're not all positive experiences I've had with AI. There have been a lot of frustrations in there as well, but I'm also going to try to be optimistic about it and really take kind of both sides and talk about how AI can be beneficial for us and our students, and also certainly a challenge. So you see up on the screen right here an outline, and some of these are very brief sections. When we get to those yellow sections, that'll be some time for you to jump in and give some examples. As Sarah said, if we have, 30 people here, we may not get to all your questions or comments, but this is an ongoing conversation, which is my last slide. We need to talk more about this. So what I'll start with here is just a review. So if you want some of the videos I've done in the past in AI, particularly like how to use AI in a very framed, targeted way, like you want to write a play or you want to do a memo, I've done short videos on those. And you can find those on the TNL website, or you can find them on my YouTube. If you need help with that, just send me an email, lucas@ltcc.edu. And for those of you that don't know, I teach social science here. I've taught sociology, and now I'm teaching anthropology here at the college. So I will be sharing a lot of my experiences from the anthropology classroom. So these first few slides are actually examples of how I've been using generative AI in the context of creating images and videos for some of my current classes. I actually am teaching an archaeology class that I've reframed from the ground up, and so these are some images that I use in my teaching. And what's cool about AI in terms of images and video is that you can put in literally any prompt you think of. As you can see in these examples, I simply put the word Lake Tahoe in there. Maybe I say sunny day, and then I fill in the rest. So in this case, I wanted artifacts, archaeological artifacts, ruins on the beach of Lake Tahoe. And you could see this was produced in the matter of a few seconds. This is kind of a weird one. I don't know what these are. I think I said something like paranormal creatures in Tahoe. So some of the things I like about AI is not just this power to create, but it creates things I've never thought of, that we've never thought of. You say, I want a black box on the shores of Lake Tahoe. It'll do that for you. So we'll talk a little bit later about how these prompts work. This is very strange. And sometimes I will put in a request to AI, and it actually will produce something that wasn't intended. Like in this case, I'm forgetting what the prompt was, but it wasn't exactly this. So there's been this discussion in AI of what's called hallucinating. And this comes up in the writing side of AI that we'll talk about today, particularly where you'll put in, maybe you think I'm a student and I want to start my research paper. So you put in your topic into ChatGPT, which is maybe the most popular form of AI right now for writing. And it produces information, but some of that is false information. It sometimes will create sources that do not exist. There have been famous journalists who have said, it said that I wrote something which I did not write. So that's one of the challenges we face. There's this generative power to create things we've never seen before. I couldn't draw this. I have no visual artistic skills. Some of you in the world of art could do this, but it'd still take you a ton of time. And the speed at which these images are created is, to me, mind-boggling and maybe a source of concern. So this is an example of a prompt where I said to AI, I want, for one of my videos that I show in class, some miniature images of archaeologists. So again, it produced this in a matter of seconds. I had to do very little in terms of the actual prompt. Again, I'm showing you some of the more spectacular images. This is an image of I wanted students to think about time in the archaeology class, so I had a lot of images of giant timepieces and sundials and other kind of monoliths like this. Again, it can imagine things that allow you as an instructor to visualize for a class without royalty issues, without, in some cases, having to pay for it. We'll talk about that later as far as what programs are available. I wanted to create a fictional casino for my class as a narrative that was a time and ruin based casino. So this is what were some of the images that were produced. So decaying slot machines, and there are quite a few others as well. So again, really the power of creativity. Anything you can dream of, early humans, homonyms as we call them, in glass containers, This is an example of a prompt that was focused on pattern diagrams. And the next one I didn't even ask. For some reason, it produced Darth Vader. I kid you not. I did not put anything having to do with Darth Vader. I just said I wanted a monument with a person's face, because there's a section in our class where we talk about monuments and memorials, and they're going to have to make a fictional monument or memorial in Lake Tahoe. So I want to, again, have some creative samples. But I did not ask for Darth Vader. But the point on this is you don't have to use everything that's generated. These are maybe more traditional as far as, typical monuments and memorials. I also had it create, I haven't used these in class, but if any of you if you teach K-12 or have young kids or even want to do something like this in class, it's super easy for AI image programs to generate coloring books. And you have to be very specific about some of the prompts that you use, but very easy to do. And again, I said I wanted archaeologists on a lakeshore in Tahoe. And you can get very specific if you want particular types of cultural representation or ethnic representation. You can put that in your prompts. This was a prompt that I asked it to do using photographic style from the 1930s. And then check this out. This is the 1900s. So you see it is very good at adjusting stylistics, even the technology that you see in some of these images. So just amazing in the sense of what you can do with this. So I think the first thing to know about AI, whether you're doing text-based AI, coding-based, or image-based AI, is that you operate from a prompt. So a prompt is a textual piece of instruction. So in this case, in the bottom right corner, the image that was produced, I asked, I believe this was from the Adobe version, which you have access to. You also have access to Canva, which has an AI image generator. I subscribe to Midjourney. A lot of these programs, and I'll talk about different types of AI programs later, they run about $10 a month if you want to buy them yourself. They're not super cheap, but Midjourney for me produces some of the best images. So in some cases, I feel like it's justified to spend that $10 a month. So I asked in the prompt, a group of faculty are meeting looking at AI images on a giant screen on the shores of Lake Tahoe on a stormy day, dramatic lighting. And I think I might have checked. This to me looks like the style they call visually like synthwave. It's very futuristic. It has a lot of purples and pinks in it, and luminescence and all this kind of stuff. You see what it produced. And what we can do then is, if we don't like what we received in our image output, one to four images typically is what it will do, depending on the program, you can go back in and adjust that. And what I like to do is I save my prompts. So if I'm doing some prompts and I come up with some good examples, I will then save that in a Word document, and then I don't have to recreate the wheel every time I do this. We'll talk about text-based AI later, but if you're working with image-based AI, one of the things you're going to get familiar with are various, it reminds me of like in coding, keywords or strings that you have to put in there sometimes to get what you want. In the case of Midjourney, their default is 2 dashes and then the string. So AR stands for aspect ratio. So as you watch TV nowadays, we're no longer 4:3 like we were when we were younger. Some of us were younger. We remember the old 4:3 ratio. We're 16:9. So if you want a 16:9 in your image, that tells it to produce that. And these are all variations, image weight. If you don't want trees in your image, you could put no trees. Seed would refer to a series of images. So if you're doing a project for a class and you want 20 images, you can use like a seed command to tell it to create a string of images so there's similarity. So for me, using the image AI is really wonderful. Again, they come up with some stuff that I would have never thought of, and it's relatively easy to use with the exception of a couple of those strings that you have to remember. Again, very weird images. Some of these were not, I asked it to create a monument. This was a case of I wanted to create what a museum in Tahoe would look like, and for some reason it had a giant cell phone. But it definitely looks, I mean, it kind of looks like Yosemite, but that might also be Lake Tahoe. I don't know. But it tries very hard. If you say Lake Tahoe, it generally understands that has a specific type of style. And you could get specific. You could say the lake. You could say state line casinos and see what you come up with. So I want to just mention this because I think there's a lot of fear about AI, and we should say AI is everywhere. It's on our phones if you use Siri. I was just creating a PowerPoint for my class the other day. And I love in PowerPoint on the right-hand side there, they do designer suggestions. And for me, it's easy because I pull in an image from my Google Photos folders, and then I say, okay, I don't want to have to resize it. So I just click on the designer suggestion on the right. Well, again, these are all AI versions, a very simple version of AI, but it's automating stuff. It's allowing us to save some time. And that's one of the things I appreciate about using AI. So on our phones, on our computers, a lot of our smart appliances at home, suggestions that are given to you about playlists. If you subscribe to Spotify, Amazon Music, there's a lot of this happening. Now, we just came off the Super Bowl, and I know some of the 49ers fans were upset here on campus. Now, football is one arena, surprisingly enough, that's been impacted by AI and what's been called the big data movement. So the big data movement preceded AI, and it specifically involves collecting information on whatever it is you're doing. So in the case of football, you can have computers, cameras, manual people collecting data about every bit of information that happens in a given football game. So in this case, they did it with soccer, with non-American football, whatever the term is, it's called football around the world. And you can see here, so if the computer can track all the shots on the goal, if it can track all this data, in the case of football, you've probably seen over the last 5 years or so, there's been a transformation in the game, and it's somewhat controversial. So you have some coaches, they'll be lined up, and it'll be a 4th and goal from the 10-yard line or the 9-yard line, whatever. And so they can quickly look at the data, the analytics, and say, well, what are the percentage chances that will be successful here versus kicking the field goal? And then it can dial down even more. It can say, what are the percentage chances of running a running back play versus a passing play? And so the coach theoretically could use all this to make a more informed decision. Now, the controversy is traditionalists will say that's a bunch of crap and you shouldn't be using this data. You shouldn't be relying on that. You should just be relying on pure coaching and strategy and what your players, your quarterback, your line, whatever, all your players suggest to you. So this is, I think, an example of how AI has been with us, and it brings with it some controversies. Now, there's AI available for every kind of app and context you can think of. I'm actually on an advisory board for a new audio product. It's called Emergent Drums. And so we had meetings just talking about what would AI bring to the world of drum programming in terms of computer music. And so, we gave insights to the creators, and over time they've been changing this program, and it's pretty interesting. So it allows you to create entirely unique drum samples to use in your music. If you're interested in all the apps that are out there, again, some are paid, some are free. You have to kind of look and check it out. I advise you to go to Futurepedia, so that's one word.io. And over time, this has expanded, and there's thousands of apps here. You can search for business apps, design apps, marketing, video, whatever you can imagine. If you teach language, you could check out if some of those are available. And again, not all of these are free, but in some cases you decide that it's so valuable to what you're doing, maybe not even teaching, but in your professional lives, that you decide perhaps to purchase it. Here's more. I got obsessed for a while. Some of you saw I had a shirt. I didn't wear it today, but I created coyote logos, and some of them are pretty weird. So again, this was my Tahoe museum, and I said, put a coyote to celebrate the college's mascot. It's pretty strange. So what I could do is I could go in there and say, make it less sinister. And one of the cool things about most of the AI, whether it's your image-based or your text, with the exception of those strings I talked about, if you want to get into the specifics of the image, for example, if you want a Kodak camera shot with a certain aperture, certain f-stop, certain exposure, you can put that all in there and it will do that. But I could go in with simple text and say, please change the coyote to make it look less sinister. Will it do it? Well, you have to see, because again, sinister can be, a subjective term. So this is kind of the explanation of AI. I wanted to ask ChatGPT, what exactly is AI? And so it's talking about some of the things we're familiar with, again, from the big data movement. So data recognition, recognition of patterns, making decisions, and even responding to human language. If you're curious, the GPT in ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And an easy example of what this means, it's really linguistics and mathematics when you think about it. What the model does is it's predicting the next word that will come after a particular word. So if I had a phrase, peanut butter and blank, well, it might come up with and jelly. Now you might say, well, wait a second, what if I'm doing a Dadaistic poem or a surrealist poem and I don't want jelly in there, instead I want a nail or a hammer or something, right? Well, that's one of the challenges with AI, and I think it's also a benefit to us when we start talking about academic dishonesty and how to check for this kind of stuff. But what ChatGPT does then is, based on all these millions, tens of millions of data points that it has stored up, it predicts, sort of as a linguist would or a grammarian, what the next word in a particular string of words is going to be. It also then, the word pre-trained means you have human and non-human trainers that work with the model. So just like you would train a kid, if it makes a mistake and if it says jelly in there and you say, well, okay, you're always saying jelly, I want you to say something else, you give that model, the kind of the black box that's in this world of AI, the information that says, try something else. So just like you would train a child, you're trying to train this model over time to make different decisions and to make it, quote, improve and so forth. Now, again, this has been with us for a while. So back in 97, there was a famous match between IBM's Deep Blue, the computer, and the chess great, he's now a great political commentator on Twitter that I follow, Garry Kasparov. And, people said, whoa, this is an example of how eventually we're going to get a situation like going back to HAL 9000 and Kubrick's amazing 68 film, 2001, we're going to hit this point of singularity, which refers to the point where consciousness is achieved by artificial intelligence. We've also had in the 50s the Turing test, named after Alan Turing. So the idea is that, you have a blind test and you ask questions to a computer and to a human. The theory goes in the Turing test that if the computer gets it right, it suggests a computer can at least mimic being a human. Now, very recently, Noam Chomsky had an article in the New York Times, and he cautioned us, the great linguist, that you're never going to see what's called artificial general intelligence. So artificial general intelligence means the computer is doing more than just simply figuring out maybe jelly goes in the next slot in the string of words. It's actually able to do things like analytically look at molecular data or chemistry data and then come up with an understanding of things and then maybe even do its own creation of something new, a new technology. And I think a lot of folks in the R&D side of things are excited about this. I just heard about a scroll that had never been deciphered with an ancient language, and it was deciphered using AI. Now again, the AGI is more like if you watch the old Battlestar Galactica or the remake of it on the Sci-Fi Channel, or HAL 9000 or Ex Machina, or that movie Megan recently, which was kind of humorous. That kind of AI suggests that the computer will achieve the state in which it has consciousness, and some people are quite scared about that and saying, well, maybe we need to set up some precautions in terms of making sure that doesn't happen. Now, just to jump back to my own work, I've been using AI. I used it to create a syllabus. So again, I wanted casino ruins for my syllabus title page, so I was able to do that in AI. The next one on the right is just an image of historical reenactors on a beach looking at a screen. Again, you can dream up this stuff. More of my coyote images. and casino dice. Now, I want to suggest to you that besides using images and videos for your classes, which I use hundreds, if not thousands, this particular quarter, you can use it for pedagogical assistance. So I was trying to think of an activity actually for tomorrow's class. I'm not going to go with what it came up with, but I just typed in, I said, hey, I want to create an art activity for my class of using these three concepts: flow, layer, assemblage. What do you think? And it came up with this. And to me, it was kind of generic. It had an objective. I don't have all of this on here, but it didn't really inspire me. So this is an example where it's not a success. I'm like, okay, it's not really helping me. But again, I'm saying to you kind of as this two-edged sword that I think AI represents, and I quote the technologist Dennis Goulet, who said years ago that technology creates and destroys. I think that perspective is meaningful to me because, again, in some cases, it produces great work, and I say I can use this in the class. In other cases, I didn't really like the pedagogical exercise that it came up with. Now, those of you from the world of English on the call today, you will likely have read this article in The Atlantic. ChatGPT will end high school English. But if you look at Forbes, just a couple of lines below, and it's interesting because the Forbes one is December 8th and the Atlantic is December 9th. So I'm not sure about that. It seems like it should be reversed. But the point is, some folks are saying, no, this is not going to kill the essay. Other folks are saying, yes, it will. So again, kind of that balanced perspective of the two-edged sword, I think, is interesting for us to think about. Now, I was just looking up what are some realities of AI out there. You get a lot of articles when you Google this, AI in education, AI in teaching. The stories like this. AI cheating is the big issue. It's corrupting U.S. higher education. And again, we want to talk about that today. This was an interesting study. You'll find other studies out there. It says 56% of college students have used AI on assignments or exams. I was telling some of you on the call today, anecdotally, when my class started this quarter, albeit it was the first week of one of my classes, it was about 80%. And I kid you not, it was like everybody was using AI, and I was just saying, please stop, trying to give them examples. And it was quite frustrating. But over time, the students learned. I allowed them to revise their posts, of course, and now it's much less. I would say it's maybe 5%. Again, very anecdotal. But what's interesting here is they looked at different majors, and I think one caution we might say, well, business majors, whoa, students are using AI. Well, of course they are. As Trevor would tell us, if you're going into business these days, you're probably going to need to encounter AI. And that's my other message today is we shouldn't be like, AI is the bad thing out there and let's shield our students from this or ourselves, because all of us in education, in the business world, wherever, in the sports world, will have to adapt to this. So it's interesting to see this data, but maybe we shouldn't be just alarmist about it. So I asked ChatGPT again. I tried to put in a lot of stuff, and I said, hey, what are some subjects and how would AI come up with in terms of cheating? So some of this you might expect, and we'll talk about this today. Art and design, of course, artwork, designs could be considered plagiarism in that case. Computer science, it's very easy to simply go in there. I'll show you examples later of how in the computer science version of this, a window, at least in ChatGPT, opens up that gives you all the code. And then you could take your Python code or whatever it is and then just copy that and paste that into whatever you happen to be doing. A lot of us that are in history, psychology, anthrosoc, languages, any of us doing discussion posts, I guarantee we're encountering this. And it'd be interesting for our conversation today here in a bit, like, well, what are you dealing with in poli-sci versus what someone is dealing with in physics? I suspect if you have purely face-to-face classes, if you have physical education or 2 or 3D art, and students are meeting in a facility and they're showing a skill like a basketball or a pickleball or doing sculpture or oil painting, that's going to be very hard to commit dishonesty on. And at the end of the PowerPoint today, I'll tell you about a brainstorm I had of how I can change my DE class with new assignments. And I'm saying DE because I really want to argue that the face-to-face class and the RSP class, for obvious reasons, probably have less of this dishonesty going on, because you can control that. And RSP is our Rising Scholars Program, for those of you that don't know. And our students typically work on packets, and they don't have access to the full internet. We're kind of moving maybe in the future to Canvas-based. We're doing some of that now, but we can control what's accessed. If you're teaching a DE class out there, you can't control what sites your students go to. And if they're using ChatGPT, then you have to think about some of these issues. So this will be our first check-in. So I just want to open it up and say, I've given you some ideas here. And in particular, I think to frame this as we move forward in this presentation, what are you encountering? The good and the bad, the challenges. Have you changed your assignments? Are you frustrated like I am? And again, this is a safe space. You can say, I ask my wife. I say 7 days a week I'm frustrated about something with teaching. So definitely, share your ideas. What do you think's happening in your fields?
So yeah, let's take about 5 minutes here, not to like rush us, but we want to be conscious of time. So just anybody put up your hand and I'll just I'll jot it down, and maybe we can just, good, the bad, the ugly.
I don't know why my hand is up. Can't seem to.
Go ahead, Fran.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I would say that I've noticed last term for the first time, not a huge amount of students using AI. I know I teach English, so I had to really sort of like think philosophically about like what is lost and what is gained, and like why I have my students write in the first place. And interestingly enough, the first place I saw it was in personal narratives, where students were supposed to be telling a story about their own life. And there were just some hallmark over rigid structure. There just were some things that, as an English teacher for 20 whatever years, like I could tell it just didn't seem like a student, like a human. So I'm not like naturally really into being a detective, and I don't want to be like this judge, jury, and I'm just not into that. I'd rather work on educating my students. So I realized that it's really important for me, one, to proactively have very clear expectations about what I think is okay to use, how I think it's okay to use AI, and generative writing, I guess, in particular, and then very clear about why in those instances I don't want students to be using it, why not, and right. So I mean, it just was one of those things, especially with personal narratives. It maybe just I could only explain it as feeling dead inside. I was like, this is not human. So I'm finding that I'm going to have to evolve maybe my thinking on some more informational writing that students do, and how to encourage them to use generative AI to brainstorm ideas. And I haven't changed any of my assignments yet on that, but I have changed where I'm proactively putting in what my expectations are and why. So, because students are usually, I don't know, and not all the time, but a lot of the time, if I have a conversation with them about it, about why, that can help for many to know. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think having those conversations up front, in fact, I'm going to change. I'm on sabbatical in the spring, but for my fall classes, I'm going to require that they watch a video where I do exactly what you're saying, which is set up my expectations, talk about how they can and can't use AI. And indeed, in some of my classes, they can use image AI to be creative. But I think you have great ideas there. And I think for all of us, we should define in our discipline, our classes, what works and what doesn't. And again, if you don't want to think about being the judge and the jury on it, maybe think of it more as, like you're saying, be proactive, educate them, and set your expectations up front at the beginning of the quarter. So yeah, I love those ideas.
Go for it, Julie.
Julie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's so interesting what Fran just said about the personal writing, because this is what I've what I've done is I'm requiring more personal writing into all of their assignments, because that's what has been working to combat the AI. So I'm really scared now, Fran.
I think it was just because that was my first assignment, and some students were maybe like dipping their toe in, and or maybe they just weren't even thinking about it. They were like, I just want to have a well-written piece. They didn't get the point that I'm trying to help them, tell
Right.
their own story and have their own voice. So, I think I do think that personalizing things and having it be more personal I would think that would help in the long term. But it just was a few students, because I didn't proactively say anything that in the term. I had nothing about AI. So, but I do think you're right. I mean, just my gut reaction would be that would probably be less than if, it just was, that's what I started with.
Yeah, I don't want to go to, write everything as a personal narrative, but I do like to require that they put in some sort of um an example of their own, something they've seen, something they've experienced, something they've observed, something along those lines. And that helps, bring it more down to earth and helps me see their voice a little bit better. I do want to share what I did last week, which was one of the most successful lessons I've ever done. And it was, I was reading rough drafts of a paper, and one of them was clearly AI. It was just a hard copy. It wasn't submitted online, so I couldn't check it. But I mean, we know what it looks like now. We're seeing enough of this. We see how broad and general it is. It's flawless prose that says virtually nothing, and uses a lot of big words and a lot of moreover, furthermore, in conclusion, all of that. Oh, my light just went out. Anyway, so I knew it was AI, and I like to write with my students if I can, as much as I can, with the assignments that I'm giving them. So I may not write the whole paper, but I'll write an introduction, or I'll write a conclusion, and I have my own topic, and I share what I'm doing with them, and I have them rip my drafts to pieces, and it helps them to see that I'm not perfect either. And so I had created 2 separate introductions to the paper that they were working on in my topic. And then I got this draft that was clearly AI. So I thought, oh, I'll ask Chat GPT to write an introduction to my paper. And so I did. And so I had 3 introductions, 2 that I wrote, 1 that AI wrote. And I passed them around to the class, and I said, okay, I want you to look at my introductions and tear them apart. Tell me which ones work, which ones doesn't, which one do you like best, and why? And sadly, most of them liked the AI version best. Yeah. Until the students who didn't started speaking up, saying, well, that's really wordy. Why do you like that? It's really hard to understand. It's just, it's not working right. And then they'd say, yeah, I guess sort of, but it sounds so professional. But it was effective because I told them to go back to it. I said, okay, a lot of you liked that one. I want you to go back and look at it, because I'm telling you right now, this is the one I would never use. And I want you to see if you can figure out why. And nobody said it's AI, but they hit all the marks on why it was overly general. It felt too prepackaged. It was just, it was overly general, yet sophisticated at the same time. It's so strange. So, and then I told them it was AI, and they were shocked. So I don't know how well that's going to work. It seemed to be really effective in the moment. I just got papers from them, so we'll see how they turn out.
Great. Well, I personally love that, and you told me that story yesterday, and I thought that's actually a great, kind of like what Fran was talking about, like a teachable moment to be able to say, hey, let's look at these different styles. And I think one of the things that maybe is not happening with the image-based AI, and again, we could ask our art and design folks on the Zoom whether or not that's true, but in the world of writing, I think there's a real chance here that you're going to see it really degrade writing in such a way where all that stylistic and flair and the uniqueness that you get when you read different authors, different journalists, you're going to lose that. And I was talking to some of you, I think it was more in social media last week, and I'll show an example of this in my slide coming up, but students have used programs like Grammarly, and you could say Grammarly is another form of AI, and Grammarly then might say, hey, this isn't the passive voice, you need to change it. But, the question again becomes, how much creativity do we want versus this sort of automated stuff that now all of us are probably relying on more and more because of our phones? So it does raise like philosophical issues, kind of, I think, similar to like medical ethics, but the ethics of AI in terms of what's this going to do to various fields out there outside of education? Will eventually all nursing go away to telenursing that's AI-based? Will paralegals lose their jobs? I mean, a lot of folks are really concerned about this. Proofreaders, folks that check grammar manually. So I think, having those conversations, as you both suggested, with students is really just an awesome idea. So let me move ahead, and then we're going to have more time for check-in and conversation here. So what I want to do here was show you a couple samples. And so this will show you just what we're talking about here, where we're concerned with AI becoming a part of our classes in terms of academic dishonesty. So this was one of many possible assignments that students could do for their final. And note, I don't have this up here, but one of the 7 options, or 2 or 3 of them actually, allow students to do a piece of writing and then go to their favorite generative image AI program and create an image. So they're working hand in hand with AI in this case. Now, this particular example, though, says very clearly you have to do your own original piece of art, 500 words, focused on anthropology, magic, witchcraft, or religion. The work may not include any form of graphic AI. This must be original artwork. Be sure to include images of it for me to view. So most students did this great job with it. Well, I had one student who produced this image, and very clearly when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's really amazing. But then I noticed, and I took the student's name off, of course, discrepancy in the signing of the student's name and then this image. So what I've done here is I've blown it up. And you see when you blow it up, it has this perfect, right? You see very little variation. So this is clearly not, at least from my eye, like a pencil or a pen drawing. So one of the things, if you saw my coloring book image earlier, is I can go into AI and say, please use very broad lines, no coloring, no shading, and it will produce something like this. I could say image of Mother Nature with a snake and a bird. So, this can happen. Those of you teaching art or design, I think it would be a real concern. Now, it could also be pedagogically useful if you're teaching art to say, what does the computer think that cubism is? What does the AI think that Fauvism is, or expressionism, or whatever artistic movement out there is? And that could be like very interesting, because one of the things we won't talk about today, but we need to certainly, is how bias and stereotyping plays a part in AI. And it's gotten better, but years ago I would type in as an experiment a business person. I didn't say businessman or businesswoman, and it kept popping up images of white males. Now when I do that, it's much better, and you get diverse representations of all different genders. I don't know if it does a transgender. Typically, the images might be cisgender images, but the point is it's getting better, but there can be biases within the image creation and also the text creation. Now, those of you teaching coding, again, you simply put in, I said, I want a text-based game in Python where the player navigates a series of rooms, and it made the code for me. So how are you going to deal with this? If you're teaching CIS, how are you going to deal with that kind of issue? Business, again, I don't know these equations, but this was, I said, can you do an equation for supply and demand in economics? Now, some of you were saying, well, maybe you use this as an initial brainstorm or inspiration, or maybe you even use AI to see what kind of stereotypes or foundations it has for particular issues or concepts, however broad or narrow they might be. But again, if a student uses this and they submit that equation, and that was the assignment. That would obviously be a concern. What I've done here is, because I've encountered this quarter, is from my Anthro 102, my cultural anthropology class, which is online, this is one of my discussion posts. And it's actually in the past one of my favorite discussion posts. It says, discuss a travel experience from the past. How could you apply cultural anthropology to understand a dynamic of that travel? So what I did was I just took that, I popped into ChatGPT, and this is what it said. I love how it says, certainly, with an exclamation mark. I will do it for you. I am your robot servant. And so it puts it in, but I'm like, oh, well, wait a second. It's all a list. And I'll talk about this in a second. If you ever see a list, it's might be a telltale sign that it's AI generated. So then I modified the prompt, and I said, okay, write it as a discussion post entry. And it does it. Now, as Julie was talking about, and Fran, I think the prose is pretty bad here. It says here, as a passionate traveler, I recently embarked on a journey to a remote village nestled in the heart of a developing country. So, right, nestled. And I've noticed, like, I've actually encountered some of these on my discussion boards. They actually don't say what country it is. And I'm thinking to myself, how many of you have ever traveled somewhere and you said, oh, I went to a country this summer on a continent? Oh, really? Where was it? Yeah, I mean, of course, you're going to be specific. And then here, upon arriving in the village, I found myself immersed in a vibrant tapestry. By the way, I will talk about this later. The word tapestry, I kid you not, if you prompt ChatGPT for culture or anthropology, 9 times out of 10, it throws in the freaking word tapestry. I'm so tired of the word tapestry. I kid you not. They always have tapestry. So I'm immersed in a vibrant tapestry of customs, traditions, and social norms that seem to breathe life into the very fabric. Oh, we're getting more textile metaphors of the community, right? So what I'm getting here, kind of like what Julie was getting at with some of the writing she did in AI, is it doesn't say anything. It's just throwing together generalities. It doesn't tell us what country it is. It doesn't even tell us, like, I ate a strange food, I did this, or I encountered a strange custom. No, in fact, it's giving us generalities. So this starts to give us some insights about what's going on with the current models. Now, this is a real one. This is really darn good. So a student wrote this, and just look at all the details. So in the beginning, talks about being at Puerto Vallarta, and then saying, I was running, there were raccoons running from table to table, and, tells a story about matzo dough, and, it's so expressive, and it's the kind of thing I'm looking for with this discussion prompt. Talking about travel, talking about something they encountered, and then she doesn't quite do it here, but, at the end saying, if I use a little bit of anthropology, I could see that this is a source of understanding about another culture. So, again, I want to really argue today, if you're doing a lot of writing, we have it in us already to go in and assess writing, so we just have to maybe make some adjustments and get keyed in on some points here. Now, this is a detector, and I ran actually the essay through that sample one that I had it produced on my discussion post through GPT-0. Now, I think Julie said she subscribes to this. It's not free, but you can go in. So I just used the free thing. Now, check this out. So I put in the tapestry post that it created, and check that out. It said it's 98%. I was blown away because I've tried some of these in the past, and usually they say, nope, it was human written. So this nailed it. Now, again, it's N of 1. I tested one source here. But Julie, are you finding, since you have a subscription, that this detects a lot of the AI that you've encountered?
No.
No, okay.
I mean,
So
it does some.
Yeah.
And one thing that it's very interesting is that it breaks it down under a lot of different categories. So it'll analyze sentence length. It'll analyze the level of vocabulary. It will analyze sentence variety. And so you'll get to see, you can kind of see that, oh, in this area, it's more human than AI, but in this area, it's more AI than human. So, so it's
hit or miss.
I have come across very few where it said, yes, this is absolutely AI.
So this is rare. I tried it, and it was 98%. And for those of you wondering, and I know there are conversations with many of us with Rachel, who is our distance education director. In the old days, we had Turnitin, and then we had the Turnitin AI. I think it's become a premium service now. So I know Rachel's been reaching out to some of us saying, what could we use? Let's hope the chancellor's office will pick something up. Personally have some concerns with it because, again, it nailed it in this case. In other cases, you have false positives. And so, oh, yeah, go for it.
Fran asks, are there any concerns in putting students' work into AI detectors and then it takes their work if the student happens to be, if it happens to be student created and not AI created, into its repertoire?
Absolutely. That's happened. In fact, there were lawsuits years ago when Turnitin was doing this. And not to be the bearer of bad news, but I just got a notification on my phone today saying ChatGPT launched today a new memory feature. The memory feature is going to do exactly what you're saying. It's going to store stuff. And so, of course, information copyleft folks are saying, I'm concerned about this because it's going to store my personal information. So absolutely, the answer to that is yes. I think we should be concerned. Will it happen? Very likely. So I think anything we're using, including the old Turnitin that was checking for plagiarism, will potentially do that. So again, if that's a concern of yours, ethically, professionally, you don't have to use this. And again, my argument in a second here is going to be, I think we should focus on the style of paper, the stuff Julie was just talking about a second ago, and maybe not rely on these detectors because I don't want to have a false positive and accuse someone of something. Now, again, you could ask a student to rewrite, and there are other things you could do there. Melinda, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of times I put the same sentence or two into multiple detectors, and some say yes and some say no.
Right.
So I've just found if I do 3 and they all say positive AI, then I kind of call it out. But at some point, I don't want to accuse someone of doing something they haven't. And I think that's one of the problems with not having it on turnitin.com. If we're all using different detectors, there's no consistency on what's being called.
There isn't. And you're also raising another point about this is, in the old days when we would just Google a student's phrase and say, oh, that's the, definition of cultural relativism on Wikipedia. The world of AI, because it's doing this process of creating in the way it does, like with images, I've never seen the same image twice. In fact, it's very hard, unless you give what's called a reference image, to have AI produce the exact same thing twice. So with text, theoretically, I could put in my discussion post and I'd get 1,000 different answers. So that's why you start to see the challenges of this. When Larry Green from mathematics talked about this at Convocation, he was saying the algorithms are getting more powerful. So the algorithms that detect AI hopefully can keep up with AI, but it's this weird kind of verbal arms race, I guess, that's going on in terms of detection. So yeah, really challenging issues.
Comment of, and Trevor has her hand up and a couple people are putting something.
Sure.
He says, I can often tell easily that it's AI generated, especially in my online classes, but what have you done about the grading students' paper when they've cheated with AI?
Yeah, and I can show that in a second.
Yeah, and Christina's just said, I put something I wrote 10 years ago and it said I wrote it. So, I think we need to be careful of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Trevor, did you have a question or a comment?
No, I was just going to say, interesting. Julie, if you could run this thing that Scott ran through his free GPT-0, I'm just curious if all of a sudden, Scott, hers would say no, but this is a nice thing when it's free. It makes you want to buy it. It's like, I think we need to be careful of even that, from that business perspective of hey, these could be companies that are trying to get your business. Anyway, I just...
Oh, absolutely. And I'm leaning on the side. I think my next slide here is to say my first slide here is saying, my real fear, first off, is we do nothing. And I think this is the easiest thing to do, but it's the worst for our students, right? You say, yes, I found this post and, I know this was AI, but you know what? I'm just going to give them an A because, man, it's a ton of work, and it is. Doing the policing, digging deep, asking for the rewrites, etc. But again, the theory is if we don't do this and 15, 20 years down the road, this person is running a business or is president or is, your doctor or nurse, and they don't have all the skills that they need because there were shortcuts in their education a la AI, that's the real concern. So my argument is to say, I personally want to look at style and not detection, because for all of the reasons, information privacy, false positives, the cost of it, I'm concerned concerned about this. So if you Google today, telltale signs for AI, you'll see articles like this. I kind of came up with some of my own here. And some of you know this already. It's probably repetitive, but these are actual posts. I've taken the names out. Again, any list that you see, you're probably going to know that's AI generated. And ChatGPT puts the two colons there as well. So sometimes students don't delete the colons. Okay, that's clearly AI. Another example here would be obvious. So look at where the arrows are. So I reached out to the student, when this was the discussion post. Certainly, here's a revised version of your discussion essay. And I said, excuse me, but I'm not going to give you credit for this. And do you know that you used? And so the student said, well, actually, I used something that helped me with repetitive language. And I kept thinking, but we have tutors for that, and you can reach out to me. So I asked the student, can you please send me the information? Was it Grammarly? What was this program you used? And I haven't heard back yet. So again, this is obvious. This probably doesn't happen a lot, but that's an indication that students are using something. And believe me, I want students to use, I am not in there as the grammar cop saying, oh, you missed all these commas. There's a point where it gets to be too much. I want to hear the voice of my students. I don't want to hear the robotic HAL 9000 version of a student who talks about their trip or whatever. Perfect structure, abstract voice. So as Julie was noting, sometimes you'll get this perfect structure about Hans Christian Andersen, and it's like similarly, you get this perfect structure that follows whatever AI's version or view of an essay is. Content that reads like a review. So, I'm not saying this couldn't be, but they were supposed to watch this film on the anthropologist Franz Boas, and it sounds like a movie review. From watching the film on Boas, I gained a deeper understanding of his impact. One may also gain insights. One may gain a greater appreciation. Now, you might say, well, how did I deal with this? To answer that question in chat, I asked the student to rewrite it. And I'll mention this in a bit. I don't sort of say, hey, you're cheating, you're using AI. My buzzword is, it's too abstract. Please make it specific. So in that way, I'm not calling out students and accusing them of something, and I'm giving them the chance to rewrite it. I do this for the first at least 2 weeks of the quarter. Again, my success rates, at least in the one class, have been much better. You also see specific repetitions. Again, if you see phrases, one may. Now, again, we all write in ways. I might be repetitive in my own writing. So that's why I really ask students to rewrite stuff. It might read like an encyclopedia entry. I've noticed there are threes in a lot of ChatGPT. So the blending of indigenous customs, the introduction of new technologies, and the social and economic changes that occurred. So again, if a student wants to write about this, I would say, okay, you've traveled to Mexico, you've been to Mexico, you're interested in Mexican civilization. Please then give me your view, first-person perspective, first-person narrative, I statements, examples, detail the nitty-gritty of what is going on. So in most cases, that helps with students. Again, things are in threes. So you see here three foundational, just trying to move this window here, three foundational aspects: suspending biases, valuing cultural content, and maintaining openness to the world. And then the thing on the bottom here, the text says chunky structure. So however, comma, ultimately, comma. Julie was mentioning this to me the other day, like, there's this particular structure, furthermore, comma, in conclusion, comma. I see this almost every time when I work with ChatGPT and I do my own sample text. Also just adding do you see the word tapestry again? I'm going to put that on my wall. If I ask ChatGPT about culture, there's always the word tapestry. So in this particular case, I really felt like the student took it and added some eyes to it. Again, I said, okay, I like that you're trying to personalize it, but instead of just saying that there's a tapestry and we're weaving together collective identity, again, the textile fabrics are loved by this program, go back and rewrite this and tell me exactly why you like this idea of culture or storytelling or whatever it is that they're writing about. So jargon, strange prose, again, kind of telltale signs. I just want to mention this because people have asked me, well, what if you can't prove and so forth? Well, the truth is, whatever subject we teach, we're always determining whether or not a student is successful. If you're doing basketball and you're determining whether or not a student successfully understood a free throw, you're making a determination there. So we all make determinations when we assess students' work. So it's not a court of law. You don't have to go in front of a judge and say, I've found on GPT-0 that this is 98% plagiarized. So that's really important to note, because I think there's a concern that you have to have something that will be the level of a court document. Now, we want to follow student conduct rules. We want to make sure that students and ourselves we're all making sure that there's due process. And I've been on many grade dispute panels, and we always do that. So if that comes up, rest assured that the grade dispute process on campus is rigorous. And if a student feels like they were treated unfairly, that can be assessed through the means we have on campus. But the same thing was the case with Turnitin. When we would have a Turnitin accusation, someone would say, well, wait a second, I didn't really do this, and I think the detector is wrong. And that's why I argue to look at stylistics versus detection is my personal choice. So kind of concluding some of this, I think it's important for us to define AI. I kind of put it on a slide here. I don't know if we'll do this, but we recently updated the plagiarism and academic integrity policy. And back in the day, I wrote this along with Dr. Steve Adams, if you remember, ages ago. It was in the late Pleistocene at this college. And Ray had said, let's add to this AI in there. And I think that's a good temporary solution to put that in, to say whether or not it was AI or written by another person, that is not considered original work. But then, of course, it's important for me in my class to define stuff. So I say, don't write abstract writing. Don't use direct quotations. Don't just define things for me. Use your own personal reactions and stories and I statements. And then I've also done this too, so I've developed new projects. So in my classes, this is a face class, but I could do this online. I could have students do drawing and different activities that are creative and that do not involve even the possibility of AI. And just to kind of close this out, again, I think for a face-to-face class or an RSP class, right now, unless you're doing outside of class work in a face class, we're not dealing with AI. But in a DE class, it's very difficult. So I've thought about all these ideas. Again, I haven't tried any of these, but maybe. Video discussions, right? AI could not help them so much with a video discussion. Worksheets. I don't know about doing written posts and have them scan it, because you could copy something off a screen that was AI written and just write that out on notebook paper. Incorporating some drawing, if that's applicable, projects, and maybe doing journals and then have them scan the journal entries. Again, I don't know if that will eliminate all of the concerns, but I'm actively thinking about this. So I think to close it up here for questions, we have to work with AI, experience it, talk to our students, talk to our admin and directors, and talk to our discipline colleagues so that we're all on the same page in terms of what's going on. So opening conversation here, but let's hear some more Q&A and thoughts you have about AI.
Scott, question. Can you ask AI to be in a like a passive voice or a casual conversation voice?
You can. In fact, I tried some of this with, I was working with a colleague, and we wanted to write a text that he wrote in the style of this old famous explorer to the Tongan Islands, and it did a pretty good job of it. Now, again, it had some weird flowery language, but it can do that. But Ray, where it hasn't been successful in my experiences, I've tried to get it to do the travel essay that I have my students do from a first-person perspective, and it doesn't do it. It'll do the eyes, but it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of the raccoons, running around the restaurant. So right now, I haven't found that it does that. Others can comment on that, but will it do that in the future? Very possibly. And if it does that, then, where will we be at? Yeah.
That was my concern. If you try and get the student to, hey, talk about it from your experience. Could it produce something like that?
And your concern is well taken here, because it will certainly, if I said write about a particular country or a store or an occupation, it'll do that. Now again, I think what Julie was getting at, and also Fran, some of the writing, you start to think, wait a second, this really isn't saying anything. But if it gets to the point where it's so good, and it could write it better than we can, and it could write it with that first person voice, then what's the phrase? All bets are off. I don't know. We could ask ChatGPT about it. Whenever I've asked ChatGPT, it gets a little defensive, and it's like, well, you should see AI as a tool. This is not going to be used to cheat. So, I mean, even AI seems to get defensive when I ask it about these very concerns. But that's a great question. So, other comments, experiences, ideas.
Can I share something?
Yeah.
I'm looking at a paper. In the rhythmic tapestry of modern society, rap music has woven itself into the very fabric of our culture.
I'm gonna just lose it. The textile metaphors. Yeah. Now, was that
that is common? Tapestry is the buzzword to be concerned about.
Was that an English paper assignment?
Yes. Actually, this is the paper I was talking about that I found last week. That was AI, and rhythmic tapestry. That's kind of a mixed metaphor, but
it is. Yeah. Oh yes, the tapestry. The tapestry of all your ideas today. I love how you've all woven things together in our conversations about AI. Other ideas. What other metaphors does AI use in your experiences over and over again?
I just wanted to share a little bit about, in language learning, we've had Google Translate. This is something, unfortunately, that I've been doing since the beginning of my career here. It's very easy to go and translate something very quickly on the internet. And so I feel like it maybe's gotten a little bit worse, but maybe Kata and I have been dealing with in language learning. It's something. So I'd just like to go back to the point of really encouraging students to learn for the sake of learning, to saying like, I know you can go use your phone when you're in Mexico, but like, I want you to be able to have a real conversation with somebody there. And going back to really, and Scott and you and I have talked a lot about this, and maybe this could be a future topic for us, is how do we continue to motivate our students to have that intrinsic motivation and have that want, that desire to want to learn. And then my second point is just the variation of your assessments. Especially in the online world for Spanish, you can imagine it's very easy to, make simple like assignments that would be very easy to cheat on, right? Whether that be AI or finding a friend or, having somebody help you. And I would just say we've had a lot of success by having a ton of little tiny different assessments. And that is filling in the blank. I know I talked to Christina Tomalilo about filling in the blanks, kind of difficult for them to cheat on, even try personalized, short responses and having really tight rubrics. So your rubrics are saying, I want you to use these 4 verbs. I want you to use this, answer this question. And it gets tougher and tougher the more tight our rubrics become. So those are just a couple questions. We definitely haven't figured it out either, but it's been on our landscape for a long time. It's not, I don't think anything that we're going to get rid of right away, but Kata, did you want to add something to that?
Can I add one point?
Can you hear me now?
Kata and then Virat.
Yeah, so in languages, we are taught to work on meaningful assignments. So it's always been that point that you said, like, made the students apply the content into their own lives. So I think that's a great point that you're bringing for all the subjects that we teach. But yes, we've been dealing with applications on how to translate things for a while. So I think like low stakes assignments helps. Also, like I'm starting putting in my rubrics original work, use your own words to in the rubrics. So if they're trying to use one of these systems, at least they need to think twice that I'm looking for it. And yeah, I agree with all of you guys have said that it's here and it's staying forever. And it's a way of how also we teach the students to use it in a meaningful way for their future lives, not just cheating in assignments. How you can apply AI in your professional life, in in the future, you know?
Now, and one thing that Fran said that you posted inside the chat here, and sorry, Virat, then we'll get right to you, but it's that I comment to my students often, I don't expect you to be perfect. Language isn't perfect. Language is creative. Language is the way that we, express ourselves. So I don't want a perfect post. I don't want, the last thing that I ever want, I'm not perfect. I don't expect you to be perfect. And I think Fran shared that too. I mean, we need process and progress to grow and to learn. And I think the more that we can create our boundaries to have those be the edges, the more my students all like, whew, oh, thank goodness, especially in a language classroom, they're tense to come in, right? Or maybe in an English 101 or in a math, beginning math, and also if they haven't had a good experience before. I think we need to remind ourselves that like we're creating this space that they want to be able to make, make errors. That's okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I love
Bharat,
it.
did you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry, guys, I'm joining a little late, but I love the AI topic. I think one thing which I have worked and seen is, I mentioned it earlier also, like, hey, I got the first 50 points from AI. Please give me the remaining 10. So that means if they come up with something AI, hey, I've already downloaded the first 50 assignments from AI. If you want to come up with something new, better be not from one of those. It's just a little scary tactic, but it works because then they don't use AI. Or otherwise, I've also tried using that by saying, please use AI and come up with 50 points you want to present. They're like, what are the restaurant costs? Now, add another 10 points to it from your own judgment after going through those 50. I think it just makes them think a little bit harder.
Right. No, that's good. So again, you could use AI as a teaching tool and a foundation, but then you're saying now jump off of that and do your own work creatively. That's really good. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions, ideas, things you might adapt in your classes. Again, I'm going to do this new video for my fall classes where I just talk about the style of the writing, because where I'm really dealing with this is in discussion posts. But you might have different areas. Again, if I were teaching, the 103, the research paper class, I imagine that's a challenge, right? Like where it's a longer paper, because as Julie and Kata were getting at, I think a lower stakes assignment, if it's smaller, maybe there's less motivation to use the AI because it's a quick thing. But if it's a long project, I could see that as being really challenging, just dealing with AI being used for the entirety of a research paper. Now, if you do drafts over time, one of the things when I taught anthropology way back when in the late 90s here is we actually did peer groups. We did anonymous peer review of these mini ethnographic papers they wrote. I could do something like that in class. Again, if someone brought in an AI content, if I determined that could be AI, that would be definitely challenging. But I think if you add more process and maybe people have talked about portfolio or project-based assignments, and you see the stages of work over time, maybe that is also going to be helpful for dealing with some of that. And as Sarah's getting at, it's about the motivation, right? The intrinsic versus the extrinsic. Yeah. And I think maybe there's a lot in chat. Sarah, are you watching? I haven't been looking at it, but.
I think some people are hopping.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
But I did want to say, this was recorded. A big thank you to Dr. Scott Lucas.
Yeah, of course.
Leading this. I mean, I feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg, and there can warrant some more conversation. So I popped in my email into, I know you received this invite from me, but if there are any other topics that are hard, we want to come back to this one, take it 2.0. This is our space to really be creative with one another. So yeah.
And again, I'll throw it out there, Ray, if we ever wanted a committee or a group to a subgroup, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's something we think about. So
I think you should definitely bring this up to the academic senate, Scott. I think it might be worthy of a conversation.
Yeah,
and
I'll be very interested.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main things we want to talk about, what are our policies? If we're asking students, like we're not assuming you're using AI here, but we're asking for more clarification, more information. What are the steps that we would like to maybe holistically take? So if they're in Scott's class, they're not getting a completely different experience than if they're in my class, for example.
Yeah.
Do we want to have a set standard of how we want to tackle this as a faculty, as a college?
Yeah. And then I'd add to that maybe like a working document, where we get tips, where we share, Julie says, hey, have you noticed this happens with AI? And then we have our own sheet available to kind of assess some of this work. Because again, I'm a little leery, at least, of these AI detection programs and the possibility of false positives. So maybe we could also collaborate on, how to detect some of this and deal with it, how we change our assignments and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
No, appreciate it. I would love to get this recording, y'all, to make sure I get it on the Office of Instruction website and I can send it out to everybody.
Yeah, I'll definitely get that to you. So for sure. Yeah, no, this is great, everyone. And I appreciate your time and just your passion for teaching and talking about this stuff.
Take care, y'all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Curious to begin to understand the nature of the sounds being developed. I wasn't sure at first, but it seemed to me that the oscillators would be just fine. However, the levels of synthesis were not quite right, I do think. Aha, who is to say what the nature of sound should be? Is this something that meets your ear's fancy?